This is Daylitor Knight Tao, just working on a workout, actually in the middle of a workout, and I've been waiting for the perfect time to deliver this video to a good buddy of mine. His name is Flash. He knows who he is. He's a YouTuber. I'm sure you'll see him in the comments below. If not, Flash, this is for you. He asked me a while back in 2018, kicking out 2019 with a workout. As I always do, I work out every single day. I walk multiple miles a day, many steps as I can get in per day, burn as many calories as I can per day. I'm starting off 2019. I want to double that in some capacity, add some more strength. And why am I talking about this? Well, I'm walking around in my basement, which is also my gym. This goes all the way back to my boxing career, where my buddy Flash asked me about my boxing career. It wasn't so much of a career as it is a lifestyle, and I want to make that distinction because this is not only a video about me as I take my cool down walk here before the second hour of my workout. This is also about motivation and inspiration. What I've learned in life through not only working out, but having a discipline towards an art, which is fighting. Fighting is an art if you consider it boxing. We're not talking about street fighting here. We're not talking about unsanctioned fights or bullying or anything like that. An organized routine that you put together that you can make money off of, which is professional boxing. But I'm looking at it more of the disciplinary aspect of it. When I was younger, I was very small, very tiny. Little kid. I mean, when I was in kindergarten, I looked like I was in preschool. When I was in, fourth grade, I looked like I was in second. When I was in sixth grade, I looked like I was in third grade. When I was in high school, I looked like I was in middle school. I mean, it was like that all the way up until I graduated high school. I was 5'4", 140 pounds, soaking wet when I graduated high school at the age of 19. I had to go an extra year because I goofed off in high school, skipped school a lot. My junior year, got suspended for fights in school. Fighting has been a part of my life ever since I grew up as a little kid. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. As you know, just look it up. Google it if you don't know about St. Louis history when it comes to gangs and violence and crimes, racial divides. It is a very red and blue state down the board. People are always split and divided about something in the state. You could be 30 miles away in the most Caucasian suburb part of town, in 30 minutes across the bridge, you're in the minority part of it. Infrastructure, not the greatest in the world in St. Louis. Was doing pretty well there for a while, I would say in the 90s and the early 2000s. But as now you see that the St. Louis Rams are gone, we're back to 2 professional sports teams. A lot of businesses left. Every time we get a bid on a big business, they don't come. St. Louis has always been a very tough, unpredictable city to live in. And I remember my mother, when I was 5 years old, she was raising 3 of us. Just got divorced from my dad, and she got a job at General Motors, working around the clock. We barely saw her. I'm telling you, like for 5 years straight, I basically raised my little sister when she wasn't around, and I was a kid myself. I did not have much of a childhood. My dad wasn't around a whole lot. He was a boxer. Very tough, hard man, drank around the clock, smoked around the clock, liked fast cars, owned his own business, was a mechanic, old school farm dude who did not fuck around. If you messed with him, he would put you on your ass. He didn't care if it was me or anybody else. I've seen him get in multiple fights on the street. He was a bad motherfucker. Anybody tell you that? My mother's tough. I did not have that toughness when I was a kid, and it had nothing to do with my muscles, had nothing to do with my heart, it had everything to do with my mind. I did not know what I could not do, and it was pathetic, and I used to hate it. I was very shy, very introverted, very scared to put myself out there, didn't know how to approach people, and a lot of that came from the fact that we were so sheltered as kids. We didn't live in the best neighborhood, so all the kids I grew up with were badass kids. A lot of them were bullies. They were my friends. I've never had problems making friends, mainly because I've always learned this. If you keep to yourself and you don't bother anybody, most of the time people aren't going to mess with you. The only time I got in a fight with people is because of jealousy. My mother worked at General Motors, and we were living in a Section 8 neighborhood with a lot of people who were not working, living off food stamps, living off the government. My mother should never have been in this neighborhood for 5 years, but she was. So I grew up learning how to fight from the streets. Every single day, there was a fight. Every single day, there was a fight. For 5 years straight, that's all I did every single day was fight with other people. I'm not going to call them gangs. That's not what they were. We were a bunch of kids rivaling with other little kids. A lot of them were racist kids. I got called the N-word every other day. It was just part of growing up in the 80s. I was born in 1979, so early 80s in St. Louis. If you were African American, you were going to get called the N-word at least once a year. If you were lucky, most of the time, it was every other day. I remember walking to the video store and a comic book store. I love comic books to this day. I love graphic novels and I love movies. My love for that came from my only escape from the neighborhood was to go get me a comic book, get some penny candy from the grocery store or the end corner market there, the what we call the candy and cigarette store. Because back then you can go and pick up a pack of cigarettes for your mother or father or whoever and pick yourself up some candy as well. They knew you by name. They had your shit bagged up before you even walked out. And I remember going out and getting liquor from my dad and cigarettes, and I would always get a comic book. It was just the way it goes. And then there was a video store that I rented movies from and early NES games, and that was my life. And on the way there and back, I remember walking, and this is back when you were a kid, you could be 6 years old and walk 2 miles to the store and come back. Nobody would really mess with you outside being called the N-word, while people driving back and forth. You got used to it. But when you're with a bunch of other kids who don't have a lot of money and they get jealous, even the ones you thought were your friends, they would come at you every once in a while just out of frustration. You had something that they didn't have. And my dad was not around. He did come around. We did spend time. So not only did they see that, but they also saw my mom's new boyfriend. He worked at General Motors. He drives up in a black Cadillac. They're thinking this people down here, they think they're somebody. They think they got money. They're big timers. Let's go fuck with them. And I remember having to deal with these kids one by one. Every time I fought one, even if I lost, that person became a good friend of mine. I know these kids' names by heart. Even to this day, I can remember the fights. And I remember the ones. I don't remember the ones I won. I remember the ones that I lost. I remember the ones that I lost because they were embarrassing. And I'll never forget this one time. My mother was looking out. It was this tree that we used to like to climb right in front of our apartment. And these were townhomes. And I remember my mom opened up the door and I was getting the shit kicked out of me, no pun intended, by this kid who ended up being my best friend. His name was Little Al. His name was Albert Linson. Not Albert Linson. I forgot. No, his name was not Albert Linson. It was Albert something. I can't remember his last name, but we called him Little Al. That's why I can't remember his last name. But I remember him. He didn't punch me in the face. He didn't push me down. He didn't pull me down. He kicked my ass by kicking me over and over again in my damn nuts. And I fall down. I get back up. I go to throw a punch. He kicks me in the nuts. And then I fall to the ground. A lot of the nut shots didn't land. But it threw me off enough. And I realized, why are you so fucking weak? Now, I remember my mom was so embarrassed by it that she got on the phone with my dad. And he got on the phone with me. And he says, son, let me explain something to you. If you want to have the last name of Davis, Daylitor Knight Tao is my name out in social media, but my real name is Michael Jewel Davis. If you want to know anything more about me, social links below. If you want to know anything, my Instagram, Facebook, and all that, I'm open book. You can come find me, talk to me anytime. He says, Michael Jewel Davis, if you're going to be a Davis, we don't act like that. I have a huge family. And this is him talking. I have a huge family. All your brothers, we've all been through shit. You have brothers who served in the military. You've had farmers. You've had boxers and athletes. What are you going to be? So what he decided to do was, you know what? If nothing else, you're going to learn how to fight. I'm going to teach you how to fight. And that's what he did. He taught me two things. He taught me music and he taught me to fight. And then over time, he added things on, like taught me how to draw. He was a very multi-talented type of person. If you look at my channel, you see my art, my music, my fighting. All that came from him and my mother. My mother's very talented like that. She can draw. She's a musician. She's very disciplined, and all that comes from those two. And I thank them so much for it. But my father taught me how to fight, and that's where the boxing comes in. Boxing was not about just the fighting, and that's what I was getting wrong. I didn't want to fight. I wanted to do karate. Why? Because karate is more routine. You go in and you're not really making contact with people. You're not going to really get in a full quote-unquote fight with Taekwondo, which was very popular during the 80s in St. Louis. My cousin did it. I was more interested in kickboxing because I saw the discipline of boxing and martial arts in one form, kickboxing. So I liked the boxing, but I liked to kick. I noticed I was fast. I've always been a fast runner. I've always been a very quick thinking person. I like to mix things up. I don't like just one form of doing anything in life. And I saw kickboxing as that way. There were no kickboxing gyms here in St. Louis, so I had to go to books. I took what I learned from the gym as far as boxing, and I added in the kickboxing basically from reading books and watching movies. It was the blending of me doing that got me to a point where after a while, when I did get into a couple of fights, I was noticing they weren't much of fights. They were me hurting people because I was actually learning how to release all this anger. This anger came from 1994 when my dad dies unexpectedly, and I didn't like my stepfather, and we were living out of state down in Louisiana. I wanted to come back home. I missed all my friends. I was 14 at the time, and when we came back after my dad died, I was a different person, and I used my boxing skills for all the wrong reasons. Every time somebody pissed me off, I literally beat the living hell out of them. I got into 5 fights in like 4 years, got suspended 4 times, out of school suspensions. My junior year, I got into a fight with a guy, and I would never forget how bad I beat that dude. And I can't even remember why it happened. Oh, I just snapped, and I beat the living hell out of him. And that was actually the last time I've ever been in a fight. I was 17 years old, junior in high school, and that was the last time I've ever punched anyone in the face outside of a boxing ring. It's been, you know what? I take that back, but we'll get to that in a second. This other incident was not my fault, and I'll blend it into what I'm talking about here as far as motivation, because that's actually a good example, because I forgot about it. There was another incident, but that's down the line as an adult, and it's not quite the same, because when I was in high school, you need discipline. You need to understand that, learning in the books is just as important as knowing how to fight and all that stuff. And I was really into music, and I didn't want to do anything at the time but be a musician. So learning how to control yourself, your body and your mind, is very important. And this is why I always say to people, if you can get into anything, it doesn't have to be boxing. It could be any sport you can think of. I love to play basketball. Is another way I get my cardio in, is playing basketball. It's that experience of exhausting yourself, being disciplined, being focused, and being consistent that I love about working out, about boxing, and about anything else in life. But as far as boxing goes, once I got in a situation where I can get in the ring and I can have these controlled environments where I'm allowed to hit something, a heavy bag, another person, and they're hitting me back, and you're overcoming something, that's where the lesson came in. And that's what my father was trying to teach me the whole time. It's not about winning or losing the fight. It's about overcoming the situation that you're in the best you know how, and not giving up and making excuses for yourself. That was the lesson. The lesson wasn't, let me stay in this fight long enough where I can draw blood from this guy, or see how many knots I can put on his head, or who's going to go to the hospital. Am I going to get this girl because I look great in front of this crowd of people that it's not about all that. It took me a long time, all the way up into my mid-20s, where I hit rock bottom again. I just wasn't working. I'm just out partying all the time in college, and I was still boxing at the time, and this is where the other fight came in. It was actually a guy had fought in the ring. This is all amateur fighting. I'll tell you why I didn't go pro in a second. I was actually very, very good, and I loved fighting. The only problem with me is that I was always smaller than the people I was fighting. When I got up to my weight of walking around weight of maybe around 150 pounds, and I was bodybuilding at the time. I wasn't toning for like, you know, for aesthetics look. I looked like a top heavy, you know, Jersey Shore guy. You know, I'm just walking around very top heavy, wasn't paying any attention to my legs whatsoever, wasn't running enough. I just needed that strength. And I was modeling it after, you know, someone like Tyson. I have very muscular thighs, but my calves and my ankles are tiny. So I'm trained to explode off of my thighs and off of my waist, getting balance control and really exploding into my punches off of my shoulders, and not so much concentrating on trying to lean out so I can fight people more my size, because that would have lowered my weight and maybe I could fight people more my size. But I was in this weird zone of 147 to 154, which 147 welterweight up to 154, which is junior middleweight. And I kind of went up and down like that for about 10 years. And I was constantly fighting people 6'1", 6'2" was the biggest guy I ever fought at 154. And I'm at 5'8". I had a growth spurt after high school when I was like 21, 22 years old. I actually, because I was 5'4" when I graduated out of high school. One summer, I just went up probably 3.5 inches. And that's what changed and messed everything up for me, because I was very comfortable fighting at 147. I thought that's where I was going to stay at. I was watching all kinds of Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad, Shane Mosley, Floyd Mayweather, because those were all the guys in my weight division at the time. And Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather and Fernando Vargas, all those guys were like my fighters I loved. I was mimicking my style to that. If I had to say any fighting style that I mimicked the most, it was probably a little hybrid between Floyd Mayweather and Fernando Vargas. Defense from Mayweather, and I liked Fernando Vargas' offense, just straight punches, power, bursting through your legs and your shoulders and really pulling, you know, just trying to hurt someone. That was my style. But after a while, when you get big enough and you realize your muscle is heavy enough to be in the weight, but your height isn't, that messes things up. So what I had to do was, I was like, well, let me try to get back down to a lower weight. And once I started doing that, things started really getting messed up for me. I had a hernia surgery on my right groin. That sucked. That took a lot out of me. And till this day, it still, even after that surgery, it still hurts like hell if I'm not careful and I don't stretch that groin out properly. And I also have always had my entire life 3 fused discs in my back. All the way through school, all the way up until my adult age, I was never able to bend over and touch my toes without bending my knees, because I had those 3 fused discs in my back. We went to go do surgery, and they was like, you know, this is not worth it for him to do surgery just so he can touch his fucking toes. So we never got it done. And overall, after a while, I ended up, after I started growing those extra 3 inches when I was in college, I am now able to bend over and touch my toes. Barely get there, but I can touch them, and that's far from when I was younger, where I can only get maybe 6 inches to my feet, and that was it. Could not touch them. So after a lot of hard work and stretching out, the 3 fused discs is not a problem now. So that's one of the reasons, of many reasons, why I didn't go pro. Boxing, right when I was about to go pro, I had a lot of amateur fights. I never lost in amateurs, not one time. A couple of times I came very close. Because of my size, I did get knocked down a few times more than I would have liked when I was fighting at 154. But I didn't go to any tournaments or anything, or do any Golden Glove stuff, because I was more into music at the time. I didn't devote my entire 100% attention into boxing. It was split 50-50. It was being a musician with my band 50% of the time, and then the other 50 was boxing. I would get out of band practice and go straight to the gym. And had I devoted as much time into my music as I did to my boxing, maybe things would have been different. But looking back on it, I really don't regret not going pro with boxing, because it came at a time where there wasn't a lot of money into it. It was starting to go down. MMA was just starting to come up. So right around the time I would have became pro, it would have been a lot of money. It would not have been worth it. I was a little too old at the time to really think about rising up the ranks, talk about being champion or anything like that. It wasn't really worth it. And I decided, let's keep the discipline of boxing. I box still to this day. I have my gloves over here right now. I'm staring at them, and it's just something I always do. There are some little amateur tournaments that I like to do every once in a while. I'm going to do a couple this year. but it's for fun. It's for the discipline. It's for the art. It's not about trying to make money and all that. There's all the boxing matches. I still stay up on all that. I love MMA. Fighting is a very big part of my life. But to wrap this all up with a bow, this is one of the videos I would like to share for people who have been through things in their life that even into their adulthood, and I'm almost 40, I'm 39 years old now, I've experienced enough in my life where I know the difference between trying and getting things done, that belief that you think you're getting everything done, but you don't realize there's a little bit extra every single time you do something. There's more that you can do. So even right now, I'm walking around in my cool down after my first hour workout, talking to you guys. I could go upstairs and grab a beer and sit down and watch some football or play my PlayStation. I could do a lot of things, but I'm going to put in another hour because I want to see every single time I work out how far I can push myself, not to a point where I'm unable to function at everything else in life, but I just want to see, okay, can I do 2 more reps on every single one of these exercises that I'm doing today? Can I invent a new exercise that's going to challenge me today? Can I run an extra mile, a quarter mile? Doesn't matter. What I find is every single time I do that, I am pushing that envelope and things get easier. Not only in the workouts, but in life itself. Working on yourself is the greatest disciplinary thing you can do for yourself. And I always say disciplinary. People say it's discipline, but disciplinary is a form of punishing yourself. There's nothing wrong with punishing yourself for not working too hard. If I don't work hard at something, I punish myself by coming down here and I put in some miles on my feet running when I know I don't want to do it or I'm supposed to be doing something else. That's my punishment for going half-assed on something else. If I treat somebody the wrong way, say something I shouldn't have, do anything that I feel like, you know what, you could have done that differently, and then I have a visit down here with the equipment or with a long run. It's disciplinary motivation for myself. It's called, self-policing myself to make sure that I don't drop the ball. How can I talk to anybody about getting through a struggle if I'm not struggling? How can I correct anyone on what they should be doing if I'm trying to help them, whether it's through personal training, which I do, or boxing or music or anything, if I'm not practicing what I'm preaching? I want them to know, hey, this dude is not just talking at me. He's actually doing it. So in order to push myself, I'm always looking for the next big thing to do. I don't want to just say, that song was good enough. I put that away. You go right on to the next one. You forget about what you did. Congratulations, you did that. I always say you're supposed to do it. If you did it and it was done, that means you were supposed to have done it. So you shouldn't be shocked by it. There are no surprises. I don't want to be surprised. I just want to keep pushing. And then I want to look back maybe years from now and reflect on, wow, look at all that I've done. But in the moment, the past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. It's only this moment right here. And what I do in this moment is the most important thing I can possibly do in my life. And no one can help me with that. No one can not help me with that. Only person can help me or take anything away from me is myself. There are no excuses. And I remember many times being in the boxing ring when I get knocked down and I'm thinking to myself, it would be real easy just to pretend that hurt a lot worse than it did, just so I can just get this fight over with. But I just remember my dad. You cannot make that mental decision because you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. I know that's a fact because I don't remember any of my losses in the street fights. I remember every one of those losses. I couldn't tell you one time I won. And people might say, maybe you didn't win. Maybe I didn't. People might say, well, you don't remember the losses because maybe you didn't win any of them. Maybe I didn't. But I remember the losses because I remember the emotional impact it had on me physically and mentally. I remember how weak I felt. And I remember saying, I don't want to feel like that again. And if I forget about how that felt like, I'm going to rediscover that again over and over and over again if I forget. No, I wanted to burn forever right here in my heart. And I can remember my dad's words. I will never forget what he sounds like because that is just burning in my head. Of him telling me, about being strong and overcoming the struggle and not running away from it. There was times in my life where I was bullied. I looked like a fucking nerd. I looked like straight up Steve Urkel, and it wasn't always my fault. My mother was very like, no, this is what you're wearing. It wasn't until I was able to really pick out what I wanted to wear where I actually looked the way I felt, which was different. I never wanted to wear what everybody else was wearing. I've always had my own style, and I always wanted to be unique. And that's where the alter ego of Daylitor Knight has come out of me, is that he is what I've always wanted to be in life. He's a person who doesn't care. He does what he wants to do when he wants to do it. He's not afraid of a fight. And I don't think about what I'm doing. I just do it. I don't care about the outcome. I don't care how many people care about whether or not they like this or they like that, or they approve of this or approve of that. This is my life. So I'll do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And if I make a mistake, I will correct it myself, because again, I have a date down here with the dip station, the free weights, and a lot of miles to run. That's how I correct myself. But each individual has their own way of doing that. And again, when you get knocked down, that's when you will find out the things you need to correct. But more importantly, you'll find out the things that are more important to you in life than anything else. And everybody has different things that are important to them, which is why it's not fair for people to walk up and say, you should be this way or you should be that way. Because your life is not my life. I have not experienced what you've experienced, nor umbrella things we've all experienced together. But what matters to me doesn't necessarily matter to everyone else. That's why I keep it all home with myself. And when I got knocked down in those fights, I got up, I turned around, I looked at this guy, and I'm like, this guy has a struggle of his own. He's not gonna back down. So I can't back down. I'm gonna show him my struggle is just as important as yours. It may be different, but we're gonna figure out our differences right here in the ring. And every single time we fought, we gave each other big hugs. There was only one time that a guy fought in the ring, going back to that one fight outside the ring, couldn't take the fact that I knocked him out, and I saw him at another fighting event, and he ended up poking me in the middle of my forehead. And suddenly, I just realized sometimes you can't always hold back all that anger, even as an adult. And I remember fighting him. It wasn't much of a fight. I beat him. I beat him in the ring. I beat him outside the ring. But I wasn't proud of it. I only told 2 people. And now the rest of you. There's only 3 people in the world. If you're listening to this, if you're the other third person, you're the only other person knows about that fight. I wasn't proud of it. And he was one of the taller guys that I fought in the ring. And I remember being proud that I beat him in the ring. But I wasn't proud that I beat him outside the ring. And everybody there was like, oh man, you now you've made it. You showed everybody that you can beat him inside or outside of the ring. Because he was probably roiding up in the ring. There was a big, huge controversy about that. This is back when roids were very undetectable, especially here in St. Louis. People did it all the time. And I kind of validated that I could beat him inside or outside of the ring. But I valued the fight inside of the ring. Because it was a controlled environment, disciplined environment, with rules, and that's the way life is. You can't just go outside and do whatever you want. No matter what we do, we live in a society where there are rules. And you're going to get knocked down within those rules, and you're going to have to figure out within those rules how to get up and handle your business. Anybody can go outside and just do whatever. They don't always get so far. They might end up embarrassing themselves. They might end up getting other people hurt. But again, that's what happens when you just do anything with no regard for yourself first. If you figure out yourself first, you realize those victories within the structure of life, with all these people moving around you, with the job, the school, the wife, the parents, the kids, the cars, the money, all of that is the boxing ring. But the person across the ring is not all those people. That's just the place you're fighting at. The person across the ring is you. The person looking at you across the ring is a mere reflection of yourself. And he's coming at you, challenging you every day. What kind of person are you today? What kind of person are you this week, this month, this year? this decade, your life. What kind of person are you? And that's what I learned from boxing. That's what I learned from being disciplined, myself, disciplinary reactions to everything that I do, coming out here and pushing myself through an uncomfortable struggle every single day to make sure that I don't feel weak as I did back when I was a kid, getting the shit beat out of me in front of my mother. That'll do it for this one. I want to wish every one of you the best blessings you can have. Good luck this year in 2019. And I'll talk to you guys all next time. Flash, this was for you. Love you, man.